If you struggle with high blood pressure, you already know how challenging it can be to constantly watch what you eat. Because when it comes to managing blood pressure, your diet plays a much bigger role than most people realize. In fact, nutritionists say that the foods you eat and the ones you avoid can have a major impact on your blood pressure. For example, foods that are high in sodium can disrupt your body's fluid balance. And when that happens, it puts extra strain on your blood vessels, which can cause your blood pressure to rise. That's why it's so important to know which foods to limit or avoid. So in this video, we're going to look at some of the worst foods for high blood pressure and what you may want to cut back on to better protect your heart and overall health. First, chicken. Now you might be wondering, what could possibly be wrong with one of the most common foods in family dinners and lunchtime sandwiches across America? Well, even before anything is added to it, chicken is often injected with saltwater solutions during processing, making it a hidden source of sodium. In fact, chicken ranks among the CDC's top sources of sodium in the average diet. A single 4-ounce boneless, skinless chicken breast can contain anywhere from 40 to 330 milligrams of sodium, depending on how it's processed. That's why it's important to always check the nutrition label. Ideally, look for chicken that contains 70 milligrams of sodium per serving or less. Next, bacon and other deli meats. Whether it's roast beef, ham, turkey, or bacon, most processed deli meats are loaded with sodium. In fact, nutritionists say that even the low-sodium versions can still contain surprisingly high amounts of salt. According to the American Heart Association, just 6 thin slices of deli meat can contain nearly half of the ideal daily sodium limit, which is around 1,500 milligrams per day. And bacon isn't much better. Just 2 strips can contain around 330 milligrams of sodium. The problem is that eating too much sodium can cause your body to hold on to extra fluid, putting added pressure on your blood vessels and increasing your blood pressure over time. Another one is sandwiches. Now that may sound like a pretty broad category, but the truth is, many classic sandwich ingredients are packed with sodium. For example, a typical turkey sandwich made with whole wheat bread, mayonnaise, pickles, and a slice of cheddar cheese can contain well over 1,300 milligrams of sodium in just one meal. And when you combine processed deli meats, cheese, condiments, and bread together, the sodium levels can add up very quickly. The good news is, you don't have to give up sandwiches completely. A healthier option is to make them at home using fresh ingredients and plenty of vegetables while cutting back on high-sodium toppings like mayo, pickles, and processed meats. We also have bread. Now, most people don't think of bread as a salty food, but it's actually one of the biggest sources of sodium in the average diet. According to the American Heart Association, yeast breads, including rolls, bagels, tortillas, and wraps, rank among the top contributors of sodium in American diets. To put that into perspective, just 1 slice of whole wheat sandwich bread can contain about the same amount of sodium as a handful of potato chips. And because bread is something many people eat every single day, the sodium can quickly add up without you even realizing it. That's why it's important to check nutrition labels when shopping. A good rule of thumb is to choose bread with 5% daily value of sodium or less per serving, since 20% or more is considered high. Then there's canned soup. Now, canned soups may seem like a quick and convenient meal, but many of them are loaded with sodium. Even though modern food preservation methods no longer rely heavily on salt, manufacturers still add large amounts of sodium to improve flavor after the soup is processed and stored in cans. As a result, just 1 cup of canned soup can contain anywhere from 100 to nearly 1,000 milligrams of sodium, depending on the brand and type. That's why it's important to look for labels like unsalted, sodium-free, or low sodium when shopping. And remember, low sodium means the product contains 140 milligrams of sodium or less per serving. Another simple tip is to dilute broth-based soups with low sodium broth or even water to help reduce the overall sodium content. Alcohol is another one to be careful with. Drinking too much alcohol can also raise your risk of developing high blood pressure. In fact, research suggests that regularly consuming several alcoholic drinks each week may significantly increase blood pressure levels over time. Experts believe this happens because alcohol can overstimulate the nervous system, increase stress hormone levels, and disrupt the normal function of blood vessels. And when blood vessels become stressed or inflamed, it becomes harder for blood to flow properly, causing blood pressure to rise. That's why limiting alcohol intake can be an important step in protecting your heart and maintaining healthier blood pressure levels. Next, sugar-sweetened beverages. Now, most people already know that sodas and sugary drinks are packed with empty calories, but many don't realize they can also affect blood pressure. In fact, research has found that drinking just one sugar-sweetened beverage a day may increase blood pressure levels over time. Other studies have also shown that even small reductions in added sugar intake can help improve blood pressure readings. And when you consider that a single 12-ounce can of soda contains a huge amount of added sugar, it's easy to see how these drinks can quickly become a problem. That's why cutting back on sugary beverages like soda, sweet tea, energy drinks, and flavored juices may help support healthier blood pressure and overall heart health. Restaurant meals are also a major source of hidden sodium. No one is saying you can never enjoy eating out, but restaurant and fast food meals often contain far more sodium than most people realize. In fact, research shows that a large portion of the sodium people consume comes from foods prepared outside the home. And studies have found that many fast food customers underestimate just how much sodium they're actually eating. The problem is that restaurant meals often contain hidden sodium from sauces, seasonings, processed ingredients, and large portion sizes. So if you do eat out, there are a few simple ways to cut back on sodium. For example, try ordering smaller portions. Avoid foods that are pickled, cured, or smoked. Skip extra sauces like soy sauce, and ask for dressings on the side. Small changes like these can make a big difference in reducing your overall sodium intake. Frozen dinners can be another big contributor. Now, frozen meals may be quick and convenient, but many of them are packed with sodium. In fact, nutritionists say that frozen dinners and frozen pizzas are often some of the biggest sodium offenders in the grocery store. And even meals marketed as healthy or low-calorie can still contain surprisingly high amounts of salt. That's because when manufacturers reduce fat to lower calories, they often add extra sodium to improve flavor. So before buying a frozen meal, it's important to check the nutrition label carefully. As a general rule, choosing meals with 600 milligrams of sodium or less per serving is usually a better option, especially if you only eat them occasionally. And don't forget sauces and condiments, which can quietly add a lot of salt. Now, many people think that if they don't add table salt to their food, they're keeping their sodium intake low. But the truth is, a lot of sodium actually hides in condiments and packaged sauces. Things like ketchup, soy sauce, salad dressings, barbecue sauce, and mayonnaise can contain surprisingly high amounts of sodium, added sugar, and unhealthy fats. That's why nutritionists often recommend paying close attention to serving sizes, since even small amounts can add up quickly. When possible, homemade sauces and dressings are usually the healthier option because you have more control over the ingredients. You can also make simple swaps to cut back on sodium and unhealthy fats. For example, try using red pepper flakes instead of hot sauce, or hummus and avocado in place of mayonnaise. Pizza is another common high-sodium food. Now, pizza may be one of America's favorite comfort foods, but it can also be loaded with sodium. In fact, just one slice of cheese and pepperoni pizza can contain more than half of your recommended daily sodium intake. And even veggie pizzas aren't always much better. That's because the crust, cheese, sauce, and processed toppings can all add large amounts of sodium. The real problem is that most people don't stop at just one slice. So the sodium can add up very quickly in a single meal. That's why pizza is one of those foods that's best enjoyed in moderation, especially if you're trying to keep your blood pressure under control. And finally, salty snacks. Now, it probably comes as no surprise that foods like chips, pretzels, crackers, popcorn, and snack mixes are often high in sodium. But here's something many people don't realize. Products labeled reduced sodium aren't necessarily low in sodium. It simply means the product contains at least 25% less sodium than the original version, but it can still be fairly salty. That's why it's important to read the nutrition label carefully instead of relying only on the wording on the package. A better option is to look for snacks labeled low sodium, which means they contain 140 milligrams of sodium or less per serving. The foods you eat can have a big impact on your blood pressure, both good and bad. Foods that are high in salt, sugar, and unhealthy fats can raise your blood pressure and put extra strain on your heart. But by cutting back on these and choosing healthier options, you can better support healthy blood pressure levels. A diet rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins can go a long way in keeping your heart strong and healthy. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Blood Pressure Healthcare for more tips on managing and maintaining healthy blood pressure. Stay healthy, and we'll see you in the next video.